Various industries are starting to feel the brunt of the virus as the pandemic continues to drastically alter Americans' daily lives. A new poll from NPR finds that 1 in 5 households have already lost work. In retail, Macy's, Bloomingdale's, Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue, they've all closed their doors. The auto industry followed suit as General Motors, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler temporarily closed their U.S. factories. In the film industry, cinemas have closed and movie release dates have been pushed back, as yesterday the National Association of Theater Owners asked Congress for financial relief. And the National Restaurant Association projects that the food service industry could lose 5 to 7 million jobs. Joining us now, chef and owner of Craft Hospitality, Tom Colicchio. Tom, good to have you.
Thanks for being on, Tom.
Sure.
You know, we're concerned right now, and I know you have to be concerned right now about these companies that have these Fortune 500 companies, these massive companies that have a fleet of lobbyists that are pushing for bailout money. But I want to ask you about something that's near and dear to your heart. What about all the individual restaurant owners across America, the families that you know, put their life savings into a restaurant, maybe even 6 months ago or a year ago? I've got a friend whose whole family was about to do that in the coming months. How are those independent restaurant owners, how are those family businesses going to get through this?
Yeah, you know, Joe, we're too small to fail, and so we're not talking. And you have to understand the landscape here. We're not talking about celebrity chefs like me. We're talking about mom and pop operators all across the country right now who are just struggling to try to figure out how they're going to make this work. And you know, and you think about the amount of people that the restaurant industry employs, it's about 15 million people. Okay, if you look at total economic development around the restaurant industry, it's about $1 trillion. It's about 4% of the GDP of the country. And so, again, and it's not just the restaurants. It's about the suppliers that we pay. It's about wine purchases and beer purchases. It's about the florist. It's about you know, the person who's actually delivering linen. And so, if you look at the totality of it, we're just too big to fail. We're you know, in a position, because we are small and fragmented, that we don't have that voice. And so what I'm trying to get the population, the public to understand is just the size of the problem that we're looking at right now.
So, Tom, there's the long-term question that I want to talk about as well in a minute, which is the health of the restaurant industry after this. Sure. How many of those restaurants can actually even open again? But in the short term, let's talk about your workers and what you need. Let's talk about those bartenders and waiters and waitresses and barbacks and cooks and everybody else who make up those 15 million people. What do you need? What does the restaurant industry need now in the short term?
Sure. So most of those people, because they had jobs, will be taken care of by unemployment insurance. In the Family First Act, it's 75% of your salary, up to $4,000 a month. That's $48,000 a year. Senator Schumer is actually asking for 100% of that. That would be great. That would stop the bleeding to the families, get money to them immediately, extend the period, and get rid of that 2-week waiting period. People need the money now. Yep. You know, restaurant, you know, the people who are working, they're month to month. You know, they can't wait 2 weeks. That's number one. Number two, now we have to look at, can we get back open? Because the revenue that we take in today, we're paying bills from 45 days ago. And so when we open up, we need a package of money, and it really should be federally backed interruption of business insurance. And so we need about $150 billion if you're looking at the total amount of money. We need tax breaks. We need guaranteed loans that you want to see your amortization over 10 years, because the loans really don't help small independent operators. And so we need a package of things. We need some tax breaks. It's a total package. The NRA actually the National Restaurant Association, that NRA, put out a pretty good proposal. And so the thing is, though, when we open up, we're not going to be busy. And unless we have full restaurants, we're not making money. We can't stay in business. And then, let's think about this. Excuse me. After we open up, we got to talk about not just the economics here. We need to talk about culturally. What do we want to look like when we get the economy back going, and restaurants are where people come together. It's sort of the heart and soul of communities, and we have to get that back open. We can take care of the economics here, but after this, what kind of society do we want? And that's what we have to look at.
Yeah, and another thing you're worried about, Tom, are the more than 30 million children who take part in the National School Lunch Program. We've got a lot of schools in different cities that are not closing because the kids need this food.
Right.
As this escalates, how are we going to feed these kids?
A lot of the schools actually have the cafeteria workers. I mean, these cafeteria workers, and I'm the son of a woman who ran a school lunch program. They are first offenders at this point, and they need to be treated that way. They are actually putting themselves in harm's way. They have to take public transportation to get to these schools, and they're doing God's work right now. A lot of these kids, 22 million kids, rely on school lunch for their breakfast and lunch. Okay, and so. Again, the Family First program, the SNAP program has expanded. We got rid of all the restrictions to receive SNAP. It sounds as if the second stimulus package coming through, there'll be a 15% increase to SNAP benefits. So that really helps. The other thing is under the Family First Act, the summer feeding programs. Because when schools shut down in the summer, additional money is put on to the SNAP benefits EBT cards. And so the summer feeding programs are going to go into effect too. So those are all really good programs, and they really need support. So there has been a very good response. It's been a little slow, but it has been a very good response. But those cafeteria workers are first responders.
Yeah, there's certain areas where people are, in the grocery stores, Karine Jean-Pierre, where they're gone from, low-level workers who are getting by on minimum wage to first responders. And these are the people in the front lines who stand to spread the virus, but also help people by giving them the supplies they need.
I think that's exactly right. And the problem, too, as you all were talking about with workers, they're the ones, everyday workers are the ones who have been being laid off for the past couple of weeks. So it has been really difficult to see. I do have a question for Tom, Mika, and it goes into what you were just asking him about schools and lunches. And here's the thing, as we're trying to do social distancing and protect potential lockdown, how do we make sure these kids who really have these food insecurity issues in many communities, how do we ensure that they get this food?
Again, the school lunch programs are producing food, and what they're doing is it's not where you come into the cafeteria. You actually come and pick up the food. In Elizabeth, New Jersey, where I was born, I spoke to the mayor a couple days ago, and they have their cafeteria workers. They're there. They have protocols in place, and they're taking custodial workers who are actually delivering the food to people, and again, under strict protocols, and they're getting food out there. And so, listen, restaurant workers, cafeteria workers, we're kind of used to working in crisis all the time, and so we can make this happen. We can get it done. But right now, talking to the restaurant chefs across the country, they want to protect their workers. They're okay that we got shut. They're not happy that we got shut down, but they understand why. We have to stop this virus first, and then we can actually go forward after that. And so they get that.
Yeah. All right, Tom Colicchio, thank you so much for being on with us this morning.
Thanks, Tom.
Up next, we're closing in on the opening bell on Wall Street. What can we expect from today's roller coaster ride? We'll find out when Morning Joe comes right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.